Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Resistance TV. In tonight's programme, we're going to be discussing what's gone wrong with the British left, where and why. Did it go so badly wrong? Why was the Corbyn project destroyed when hundreds of thousands were inspired to join the Labour Party by Jeremy Corbyn's policy agenda? It became the biggest political party in Western Europe. What happened to Jeremy Corbyn's commitment to Corbynomics? How did the anti-Semitism scam make such an impact when it was plainly pure poppycock? When and why did the left abandon class politics in favour of identity politics? Well, to answer some of these questions and some of your own, I'm delighted to welcome Steve Hall onto the show tonight. Steve's one of the co-authors of a brilliant book that was published, I think, towards the end of last year. It's titled The Death of the Left. People may have seen some of the social media posts. I've certainly posted some stuff about it, and there's been a little bit of a flurry recently of posting about the book, and it's definitely well worth reading. Anyway, welcome to the show, Steve. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for having me along.
Yeah, good. Yes, well, I'm really pleased that you've taken the time out, because this is a absolutely brilliant book, I've got to say. But before we get into some of the details, can you just start really by explaining how you and Simon Winlow, who's the co-author of the book, how you come to write the book? Here it is, the death of the left, and why we must begin from the beginning again, which is very much what we've been saying for the last couple of 3 years in reality. But anyway, just tell us a bit about how you sort of come to write the book.
Well, we're both from the northeast of England, and we experienced deindustrialization. Where we experienced the Thatcher. Well, I did. Simon was a bit too young to understand what was going on at the time. But during the 1970s, 1980s, that huge shift from social democracy, and in 1979, 80, we all thought that nice Mr. Benn was going to be the prime minister, and we were going to inch towards this democratic socialism. And
I remember it well.
Before the split in 1981, when Owen and the other three characters split and formed the SDP, split the Labour vote, and then Thatcher got in again, and we thought, well, the things are just getting worse. Experiencing deindustrialization and others was a pretty painful thing, because we saw this huge thriving cities and industries all closing down one by one. We knew that the co-industry would have to close down sometime, but it was so abrupt. Pits were closing down before they ran out. People often say, "Oh, the Labour Party closed more pits." Yeah, they did, but they closed pits when the coal ran out, not when it was still there. So this is sort of nonsense you get about it. So it was a very painful experience, and we saw the left change at the same time. The left was changing, and I had a couple of horrific experiences meeting the sort of urban left in London and Birmingham and other places, and unrecognizable people I didn't really understand. And Simon's from Sunderland. I'm from Newcastle, so the rivalries there.
Well, there we go, mate. That's kind of the left coming together, if ever there was a case of it. Yeah,
he's very envious of me at the moment, but I'm sure that'll change at some point. We saw Blair, of course, come in and really accelerate
in your neck of the woods as well, of course, getting elected just to add insult to injury, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I was born in just outside a town called Consett, which was once Europe's largest steel works.
Yeah.
Of course, Durham coalfield was the third largest coalfield in the country. So we were industrial men, and we saw the whole thing decline. And we were promised new jobs in IT and the new technologies, and this didn't happen. The areas depopulated to some extent. People moved out, and they did do what Teppert said: get on their bikes and find work. And now places like Newcastle and Middlesbrough are very reliant on the universities as the main employers, and that some of these places are shells, Chris. They're very quite depressing places. We never got the industry back. We didn't get the light industry back and the jobs. And most of the jobs that replaced when we saw the shift from an industrial economy to a service economy. You see, a lot of people on the right say now, well, we've got good employment, but they're terrible jobs. A lot of them, they're part time, they're 0-hour contract, selling each other ice creams and tattoos. People don't have the pride in that sort of work that they once had when they were making ships and steel and that sort of thing. So it was the experience of that, of Simon's family, and of course he experienced it. And we met in 1998 as academics. I'm an economic historian, sociologist by trade, but we both ended up working in criminology departments. Don't ask why. Jobs came up, we took them, and we met in a research project in 1998, researching the nighttime economy, because the nighttime economy during the Blairite era was one of the big employers. People nightclubs, restaurants, and all the rest of it. So we were paid by the Economic Social Research Council to research that, particularly violence and policing in the nighttime economy, because it was getting quite a bit rough in some areas.
No,
so
indeed.
I wrote a few books about that, but we were always keen to write this book because we thought that we felt as though we had been deserted by the left. The left had done nothing to even promise to repair some of the damage done by deindustrialization. So we had our relationship with the left was rather fractious anyway at the time. So we thought we'd better work out how this happened, because nothing we read at the time was satisfied us. We had lots of explanations about why the left had more or less gone down the neoliberal path. But we weren't satisfied. So we thought we'd invest with professional researchers and we're supposed to be academics, intellectuals. So we thought we'd better do it ourselves. And I think you might agree, we uncovered a rather grim tale over the decades.
You did. Look, I think it's a seminal piece of work, I've got to say. I've not seen anything like this. I kind of almost agree, I think, with every word that you've written as well. So in that sense, it's a real kind of, I suppose, endorsement of my own thinking. It's wonderful to see it, applied, with the academic rigor that you've done. But I was particularly pleased. I want you just to sort of say a little bit about your section in relation to the economy, because you've talked about modern monetary theory. It's something that, I was banging on about. I mean, I kind of discovered modern monetary theory probably about 2018. Is when I came to it, and then I met Bill Mitchell, who's a kind of godfather of MMT. Yeah, good bloke, Bill, and also met with Stephanie Kelton, who's written another really good book called The Deficit Myth, and Bill's book called Reclaiming the State, and essentially, talking about having an understanding of the monetary system, how it works, using modern monetary theory as a lens to understand the way the monetary system operates, is an incredibly powerful tool, I think, for socialists. And when Richard Murphy was advising Jeremy Corbyn in his first leadership run, he was essentially, applying MMT principles, and it got labelled Corbynomics by the Blairite former Shadow Chancellor Chris Leslie as a put down, as a pejorative description, but it was quite a snappy sort of title for it, really. So just say a bit about that, will you? Because I think it's one of the things we need to be doing. This is why I think this book is so important, because in a way, yes, it's depressing, but it's also the point that you make about as you say on the front, why we need to. I can't read it in the slides actually. Why we must begin from the beginning again, and part of that. Beginning again is raising political consciousness, and one of the things I'd love to see consciousness being raised on is the economy and how the monetary system operates. Like Henry Ford said, if people understood how the monetary system operates, money and the banking system operated, there'd be a revolution by tomorrow morning. Well, I want to see that revolution, So say a bit about MAT and what your thoughts are and where the left is, and if you've got any views about why it is that Jeremy notionally sort of embraced Corbynomics. And then abandoned it.
He sort of embraced it. Now, the story I have is that certainly Richard was one of his advisors, but his other advisors, Jonathan Porter, Simon Wren Lewis, and a guy called Medway, I think, James. Oh,
James Medway. Yeah. Well, he's very hostile to him.
These three, the three amigos, as it became known to us, were anything but MMT supporters. They were neoliberal. They still were sort of believers in Friedman's quantity theory of money. That if you print too much money, you'll cause inflation, and you'll put your children in debt for the rest of eternity, and we'll all go to hell, and it would be great gnashing of teeth, etc. And they were Corbyn's main advisor, certainly McDonnell's main advisor. I don't know if there's any tension between John and Jeremy. I mean, you probably know more about this than I do, but Bill had an audience with John McDonnell, he was given 20 minutes to explain his economic theory and how it could be used by the Labour Party. The problem Bill had with it, one of the problems certainly, was that they were putting a limit on investment. I think it was 250 billion. I think they're doing the same now. Why put a limit on something, on investment? If you can invest in productivity, you can create more fiscal space for more public investment. But the problem is that neoliberals, they're terrified of the idea of public investment crowding out private investment. MMT theorists know they call themselves monetary engineers, and they know how the system works. I'm a member of a board Discord group with an MMT economist called Neil Wilson, who's he knows, he's an accountant. He's worked with the big banks. He's worked with the Bank of England. He knows exactly how this labyrinthine system of accountancy works. Where money comes from. Where does money come from? It comes from the state. All money is owned by the government. It's created by the government. When a bank makes a loan, and the Bank of England have confirmed this, when a private bank makes a loan, they don't just lend out, the savers' money that they've lodged with them. They actually create new money. So when they make a loan, the Bank of England credits their reserve accounts with new money. So the other way to create new money is by direct public investment. The thing is, that's interest-free, or some of it is anyway, but the banks this is their business. They want to lend out money and charge interest. That's how they make that's their business. So they are terrified of a portion of their business being taken away from them by public investment. And this is the American way of thinking. Everything should be privately. But because the Labour Party have accepted this, Rachel Reeves went over, didn't she? To get her instructions from walls from the
God.
And what they do is they create a huge scare story about inflation. The printing, well, actually, we all know now that Twitter is full of these neoliberal economists saying that printing money causes inflation. No, it doesn't. Rising prices, supply shortages cause inflation. Printing money is a reaction to that when people ask for wage claims because they can't afford to live. So these are facts, but you can't get these facts across to people because neoliberals over the past 40 years have created these huge scare stories. They're grim tales about what inflation. We all remember the Weimar Republic in Zimbabwe and Venezuela, and they cite these things. But we're not in the same situation as the Weimar Republic was after the First World War. It's ridiculous.
Well, their productive capacity had been absolutely decimated, and the French went and occupied the Ruhr Valley. The kind of the engine room of the German economy.
And they owed huge debts in foreign currency.
Well, reparations and all that malarkey. Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got, of course, the same with Zimbabwe. When Mugabe gave the farms to his war veterans, they didn't know how to farm. So the farm production. No,
precisely. I mean, I think Bill Mitchell that you mentioned, he's covered this in his regular blogs. He's someone else who's worth following on Twitter, Billy Blog, @BillyBlog. Well worth following.
They're great, and they know their stuff, and I dip in. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a macroeconomist. I'm a historian, stroke sociologist.
Yeah,
I understand what they're talking about. The problem is nobody else does, Chris.
No, but I do think people are increasingly waking up to the opportunities that an understanding of the monetary system, an understanding, of MMT, using that as a lens.
That's true. But the problem is, it's so complex. And if you read Bill Mitchell's blogs, I know the Billy blog and the New Wayland that Neil writes, and they're great people, but it's politically naive to think that people are going to follow this story.
Oh, yeah, no, indeed. Although I think your book, to be fair, I think you've broken it down in a very manageable and accessible way, to be honest with you.
What we need is a political movement, a political party, to put a political message around this. It's got to be a simple, comprehensible message. I think Kelton did the best with her book, The Deficit Myth, to explain.
Yes, she did. She's a great raconteur. Yeah, she's really very good.
She popularized it quite well. We can direct invest in anything we want: energy, postal service, transport, agriculture, you name it. We can do. She's doing it every day over in China. Putin's doing it now. I'm saying we should copy Putin everywhere, but all the time. direct investing, and Chinese, have 250-mile-per-hour trains now. Where the Americans,
right. Absolutely. I mean,
systems falling apart.
I know. Well, George Galloway was talking about this on the Moats show the other day, and he said the Chinese in the last 40 years have built 1 million bridges, and while the bridges in the United States, their infrastructure is totally crumbling, falling down.
And the only American politician to be shooting this line at the moment is Robert Kennedy.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Between you and I don't think Kennedy's going to win. But
no, he did. Although he's got some dodgy views on some other areas on.
He has, exactly.
But I mean, I suppose you have to be thankful for small mercies. But definitely, this is a great. I mean, and it's a great entree to the book, and indeed, and a great entree into MMT. So, if for no other reason, people should get this book and read it, because it really is a great way, I think, of raising political consciousness. But I'm just conscious of the time, and I just want to obviously get into a few other things, and then see bring in Sean, because there may be some comments and questions possibly from the audience. But obviously, you've covered. I mean, we'll not be able to get into all of the book today, but I mean, you've talked about, I think, one of the chapters, that the rise and fall of left-wing populism. Just say a bit about that, really, because I mean, I'm very much. I mean, I remember what's his name, Tristram Hunt, going on about when Jeremy was in pole position to win the leadership, saying, "Oh, we're in danger of turning into a left-wing populist party." I'm thinking, well, Christ, that's what we want to be in it. Politicians want to be popular. What's wrong with that? But say a bit about that then, the kind of rise and fall of left-wing populism, can you?
Yeah, populism is the bête noire of the PMC, the professional managerial class, the technocrats who control the economy, who control education and all of the other vital institutions, who regard people as, I mean, even George Orwell. You can read George Orwell and the left, or Aldous Huxley on the right. They basically regard people as a stupid bovine herd, who really don't know what they want, and they don't know who they're voting for, because they don't know who they're doing. The worst technocrats, of course, are the banking and the technocrats, who argue that they know how the economy works and leave it to them. And populism is this dangerous headless creature that can be susceptible to demagogues like Hitler or Mussolini, that can be persuaded by the far right to go down that line. Well, populism, that's simply monsterizing the term. Populism was never about that. I mean, the American Populist Party in the 19th century, Roosevelt was accused of being a populist. Now, Aaron Bevan was accused of being a populist. Less so Clem Attlee, because, as you know yourself, he was a sort of backroom fixer who got everything done. But every time democracy starts looking like it's going to burst through, when the technocrats fail, and by God, did they fail in 1990, in 2008 again, didn't they? They failed so badly. The technocrats suddenly, people thought, well, the technocrats don't know what they're doing. The great financial crisis, austerity was the only answer they had to it. We must suffer, ordinary people must suffer, rather than investing in the economy, lowering interest rates, doing exactly the opposite of what the neoliberals did. And the technocrats failed. So when the technocrats fail, and they fail regularly, all the time, we've seen it, every 20 years or so, they crash, they fail. And people look as though they're going to rise up and do something about it. They're terrified of the wrong people getting a hold of this headless political energy from coming up, welling up from below, and turning it against them. So the people are their enemy. They hate the idea. To me, populism is democracy minus representation. You find proper representatives, people who do represent the people. And we had those people in 1945. We had a few of them left right up through into the late 70s. We had, politicians, and I think you're one of them. I'm not trying to blow smoke up your backside or anything, Chris, but I think you're one of them who represented people, who understood the needs of working people. Throughout the history of the British left, the British left, from the late 19th century, from the Chartists through to the Fabians, right through to the Christian Socialists, Tawney and the rest of the 1930s, were basically taken over by middle-class eccentrics.
Yeah.
Now, they were nice enough people, or some of them were. Some of them were eugenicists.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, some of them wanted to see the simple people euthanized and sterilized.
Yeah.
And that was their attitude. You know, if you read books like Carey's The Intellectuals and the Masses, read some of the outpourings of the Bloomsbury group of Aldous Huxley and Sidney Webb and H.G. Wells and all the rest of these people. They have to hold the working class in contempt.
Yeah.
The very idea of having working class people represent themselves in Parliament and get their hands on the tiller of the economy and the educational institutions and culture terrifies them.
Oh, totally. I mean, one of the reasons I was attacked, obviously the Zionist lobby got their teeth into me, but the other thing was, of course, the democracy campaign that I was waging inside the Labour Party, the campaign to get open selections adopted as formal party policy. Unfortunately, Jeremy blinked on that one as well and persuaded the trade union delegations that were going to vote in favour of it. Indeed, the Unite delegation, it was their policy, the back-to policy of mandatory reselection in 2016, and then Len McCluskey led his troops to actually vote against the proposition in 2018 at the 2018 conference, and it would be because the votes, as you know, are split 50-50 now on the conference floor between the CLPs and the trade union delegations. The CLPs were over 90% in favour, and this was reflected as I went around the country. Huge meetings, not as big as what Jeremy got, but huge meetings, very energetic, very enthusiastic. People genuinely felt we're going to get our party, I'm not necessarily back, but we're going to get it for the first time, and we're going to be able to make a real difference. I mean, one of the things we used to quote, Steve, was Ed Miliband when he was standing for the leadership in 2010. He never followed through any of the stuff that he was sort of saying. It was a fairly modest, mediocre stuff in any event. But he lost his way almost immediately as soon as he got in. But one of the things he said was that if we'd listened to our members more when we were in government, we wouldn't have made as many mistakes. And again, something I've often said, so there'd been no war in Iraq, or at least there's no British involvement in the war in Iraq. There'd have been no tuition fees. There'd have been a proper industrial, strategy. We wouldn't have, continued the privatization agenda and so on and so forth. And, they were just desperate to stop me. I mean, all sorts of dirty tricks were deployed. Go on, sorry, Steve.
The late 1970s when Peter Shaw, who was actually a centrist, he wasn't known as a leftist.
No, he wasn't. Yeah,
and Tony Benn wrote the best Labour manifesto I've ever read, using North Sea oil revenue. Not that they needed to do that, according to it doesn't matter. No. People can understand that you're using revenue. They don't understand this idea of money creation by the state. Because
to be honest with you, Steve, I don't think most of the politicians do either, though.
They haven't got a clue. But most of the members you're talking about are very important, and I agree with you. But underneath the Labour Party members are the ordinary people, the swing voters, the undecided, the people you have to attract. I mean, Nicholas Luhmann, the German sociologist, put it nicer, and he said politics is one of the few things that is run on a simple binary. You're either in or you're out. You're either in power or you're out of power. And if you're out of power, you can't do anything.
No.
The trick of how to get into power without pandering to some of the worst elements of society is the hardest trick of all. And to be able to do that, you have to be incredibly coherent. You have to show solidarity amongst the MPs, amongst the representatives. You have to show, and that solidarity obviously wasn't there. Reading your book when you talked about these Labour Party headquarters apparatchiks sticking the knife into everyone, it just doesn't exist in the Labour Party.
It doesn't.
Coherence that you need in order to get a message across to people and say, look, this is what we're going to do. We understand your problems. You're insecure. You've got crap jobs. You want families. You want to be able to plan for the future. You want a house. You might want to buy your own house, or at least you want somewhere that you can rent where you can afford, in a decent place, where the services work, where the policing is adequate, where the bins are emptied. These are simple things. Working people are very practical people. I come from the heart of the working class. My dad was an industrial plumber. Simon's dad was a crane operator. I haven't done Alan down there. I think he might have been something, but I think something to do with cranes anyway, Cole's cranes. And we have fairly simple needs. We're more complex people culturally than those simple needs, but those simple needs always come first. And if working people don't think that those simple needs are going to be met by politicians, they won't vote for them.
Absolutely.
What they'll do is they'll vote for the least worst. This is what we call negative politics in the book. They don't vote for the Labour Party because they're just Labour politicians. They vote for them because they're slightly better than the Tories, or vice versa.
I'm not even sure that's true anymore, but anyway.
So again,
I'm not even sure that's true anymore, really.
I'm not sure. No, I think that the Labour Party, when it gets in, I think it probably will probably tarnish the name of the left forever. So I think our book might have been the last rites, and they'll come in and they'll bury the left forever. Because
absolutely. Well, it's certainly nothing far worse than Blair. And I think that's because, Corbyn, Jeremy, he, frightened the horses, really, because he got so close. And obviously they're determined not to let that. I mean, and I think you were talking about, you need that coherence, and that wasn't there. But even without that, we got the biggest increase Labour in vote share since 1945. And, we almost got over the line. But part of the problem was, and one of the things I was so passionate about the democracy agenda was, as I said to Jeremy, look, Jeremy, if we win with this shower of shite that we've got in the Parliamentary Labour Party, we won't be able to deliver our programme because they'll sabotage you. So we've absolutely got to get these democracy reforms through. We want to get rid of some of them. We've got to give power to the members to get rid of some of these shitbags, if I can use that term.
And, it's your show, Chris. It's your show.
Well, indeed. And have the sword of Damocles hanging over the remainder of them, so that they would, have to have some respect. Because at the end of the day, the programme that Jeremy was putting forward was incredibly popular with the vast majority of the public. But in the book, you go on and you talk about the the new left, and you're pretty scathing actually about the new left, and they've kind of abandoned class politics. Just say a bit about that. Yeah,
that's a horror story. I think the watershed was 1968. The left, let's be honest, I mean, we've written about this in other articles too. The left has never been run by the working class.
Yeah.
We've had representation, but we're always stopped from, even Aaron Bevan wasn't Prime Minister. He wasn't allowed to be on the actual top seat. We're never, it's the same in academia. It doesn't matter how clever you are, Chris, they never allow you to run the show because they don't want your values and they don't want your knowledge and your experience being the leading influence in any institution. They have their own visions, they have their own values, and they have their own history, and they have their own culture, and they want to remain in charge. And the professional managerial class, these PPE graduates, it's politics.
Yeah.
They go to Oxford and learn politics, philosophy, and economics in 3 years. I mean, it's great. 3 years. I mean, honestly, and they parachuted into safe seats. I think we just had a couple lately, haven't we? And they just carry on that tradition. We've never. They don't want us in charge. It doesn't matter how clever we are. Doesn't matter how good we are. I mean, I don't know if we have any work. I mean, there's Ian Lavery. I know. Are there any more left in the Parliamentary Labour Party? Any genuine working?
John Trickett, I guess, was a plumber. I think. There are one or two, but the problem is, though, Steve. So go ahead.
Small handful.
A small handful, yeah. The trouble is, though, that they're not speaking up, they're not voluble enough, But you mentioned 1968. You were saying, that it was.
It all changed because up until 1968, the left had been firmly focused on economic management. The neoliberals had made the old classical liberals had made a terrible mess of things in 1929. The whole thing crashed, hit the ground. The results were horrific. We saw what happened in Germany, in Italy, and then the Second World War was this. It was such a terrible thing that people said, never again. Let's try to manage the market. Now, social democracy isn't socialism, so it's not the aim, but it was a good platform on which to build it. Just think of what they did. They nationalized huge industries. They set up state-owned relations pension system. They set up a national health service. They set up sick pay. They made incredible changes that we've never seen the like of since. You know, people talk about the 1960s, the decade of change. It's nonsense. So there was steady economic management. They were kicked out in 1951 because of austerity. The Tories promising that they would bring us in like they always do. But the Tories, the programme was so successful, the Tories had to carry on with it. They laid down something that was almost indestructible at the time. And you know, I was brought up in the 1960s. It was a fairly happy decade. It was the swinging 60s, and things were just going to improve. Harold Wilson.
Oh yeah, well, we're a similar generation. Absolutely,
the boomers, people I think rather envious of us, and you know, because we had the hope and optimism. Okay, so French 1968. There's this set of riots across the country. It's nothing like the French Revolution or anything. It was riots. The French intellectuals, Pierre Victor, Michel Foucault, and all the rest of these people, Lyotard, all went out to the Renault factories in the fields to try to get the workers on side, and they decided that they didn't like them. They were all drunken Catholics. They was quite nationalistic. Well, France is nationalistic sort of place. It's a republic. They're very proud of the country. Yeah. And they sing the Marseillaise, don't they? The rugby matches, the football matches, And they're very proud of their country. They said no. At that point on, 1968, the intellectuals, the French intellectuals, stopped being Marxists and Maoists and all the rest of it, and they became what were called post-structuralists and postmodernists. They decided the working class was no longer the agent of history. Their ideas spread throughout Europe, and America took them on board. Now, the American counterculture already made a mess of left-wing politics, with all those stupid beatnik and hippie visions, the libertarian hippie visions, which had nothing to do with the management of the economy on behalf of the working class. It was all about freedom and this sort of bland, abstract notion of freedom, meaningless notion of freedom. And so these ideas were taken on board by the Americans, and the post-structuralism became the thing in America. It spread what we call, what was his name? Rudi Dutschke. Said, one of the German radicals said that post-structuralism began its long march through the institutions, through the schools, the education system, into politics. It's now even in the health service. We see post-structuralist identity politics in the health service. The working class was no longer fit to be the agent of history because it was deemed to be racist, sexist, regressive, drunken, Catholic, whatever. And we weren't good enough. Really, this was a continuation of the Bloomsbury Group's notion of the working class in the 1920s. We've never been good enough for the middle class. We've never been good enough, never been trustworthy. So these ideas spread. And now we have whole generations weaned on the idea that the working class is a failed, I call it a failed analytic. It doesn't exist. It's just one identity in the intersectional matrix of race, sexuality, gender. It's just one more thing. It's not it's not a structural it's not a structural thing in itself. It's simply one more identity amongst others. And these ideas spread, and these ideas now control the whole educational institution through secondary school into universities.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously very scathing in the book, quite rightly, about the impact of neoliberalism, but you also cover quite extensively how this kind of new left sort of embraced neoliberalism and how the kind of neoliberals embrace the kind of new left. This whole identity politics has been embraced. I mean, I've spoken about this before on this show about the obscene spectacle of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin marching in the Pride marches in the States with big banners, Lockheed Martin's. But what the? I mean, so saying about that. I mean, how did it come to this that you've got the left embracing neoliberalism?
Raytheon and Lockheed Martin don't give a shit about gay people or women.
No.
They don't give a damn. But what it does is that it squeezes class out of the picture.
Yes, of course.
Now, what they realized in the 1970s, I don't want to sound like a wacky conspiracy theorist, Chris, but the CIA and the intelligence services were observing post-structuralism. There are documents now which are now out of embargo, which you can read, which said, this is a great development for us, post-structuralism. This is wonderful. because they're pushing class out of the picture. Let's encourage this. So the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the two big funding research bodies in America started pushing identity politics as anything to get rid of the notion of class. So we're useful to neoliberalism in the sense that we marginalize class better than they could. When they tried to marginalize class, it always looked as though this was simply a classism. This is a way of, this was a way of attacking the working class. What we do it ourselves, it's look like we're doing it for the right reasons. And we're doing it because, there are other important, and these identities are important. You can't say that racism and sexism are not important issues. Of course they are. But the whole thing was too easily absorbed into the neoliberal political structure. And they simply use it to convince us that we're living in a free, democratic and progressive society. Nancy Fraser, the American feminist, called it progressive neoliberalism. They've taken on board progressive identity politics, and look, they own the papers, they own the mass media, they're funding all the research in the education system. They've got the money and the communications technology to put this across. We haven't. We've gone, we into this little stream here on YouTube, which I hope loads of people are listening to. But they've got a global reach. They've got the ability to put this sort of stuff across. So they become the champions of progress. Neoliberalism has convinced people, and we walk straight into this. Michel Foucault, one of my pet hates, the French philosopher, inverted commas, who's actually failed his psychology exams again at university, so became a fake philosopher. In the 1980s, he was dying. The 1980s, he died quite early. He said, look, let's give neoliberalism a go, because the market looks more democratic than the state could ever be. Now, the market is democratic. Now, this is what Americans will say now. The market is democracy. You get Martin Wolf commenting on the problems of democracy. He calls it democratic capitalism. That's his name. He uses democratic capitalism. They think it's a true meritocracy. They think it's a market. People play the market, and the winners succeed and the losers lose. That's better, they say, than having a state which is capable of the horrors that we saw in the 1930s and the 1940s. So they play on this all the time. This will happen if we have the state back. If the state becomes the economic manager, we're risking the return of Nazism and fascism. And they got that story off to a T. And then they could bring inflation and debt and deficit into it. This would, they've got it off to a T. What we haven't got is a counter narrative. We haven't got a movement willing to construct a counter narrative that is powerful enough to dislodge this and to show the nonsense that it is. And MMT can't do that. MMT would be great to have on board as economic advisors, but MMT can't construct that narrative.
MMT is just a tool, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's not an ideology. I mean, it's neutral in that sense. I mean, it can be applied by the right just as much as it can by the left.
As far as Mitchell's Reclaiming the State, which I think but again, it's a great book, and I know Thomas Fatsy very well. He's a very good writer. It's overly it's like ours. I mean, ours is not we're not going to change the world with our book. We're just trying to get through to the people who are already politically engaged, to try to suggest that we try to create a coherent counter narrative based around economic management and public investment. We're moving into the fourth industrial revolution. The world's decoupling. The BRICS are now amassing a new trading bloc. The West needs to reindustrialize. We need to go down the green route, although we don't need to scare people to death with Extinction Rebellion and degrowth and all of these silly names, and go out into the streets and stop the traffic. That just puts people off. It deters people. What we need is a narrative that puts people at the front of it. And it says we can move into a new fourth industrial revolution. We can have cheap, clean energy. We can have jobs that mean something, that are fulfilling and secure. We can straighten things up, and we can do that quite easily using public investment. We need a mixed economy. We don't want the state running everything, because, again, that would scare people to death. And the state can't run everything. I mean, you probably know as well as I do the stories about Gosplan trying to run a huge economy from an office block in Moscow in the 1960s and 70s. It just didn't work. So you need some private business, a small, medium private business. You don't want the state running your local cafe and your local pub, you know.
And I think you can encourage cooperatives as well, small-scale cooperatives and things like that as well, you know. So, I mean,
you shouldn't push them down people's throat. If people want to set up cooperatives, let them. If they want to set up...
Yeah, no, indeed. But we should provide the infrastructure, if you like, to make it possible for people. But no, totally agree with them that. I mean, but look, Miles said, look, even a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a solitary step. And I think this book is very much more than that solitary step. And, as far as building that or, creating that counter narrative that you talk about, I totally agree that we need to do that. The Labour Party is a lost cause. The left is kind of all over the bloody place at the minute. There are some of us who are trying to, bring people together as best we can. Very difficult. The whole identity politics is getting in the way. And, you've said something about trans rights, so you're a bloody persona non grata, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But the Workers' Party, I think, are attempting to, create that counter narrative. Still a small acorn at the moment, but they're doing that. Workers. I mean, I've joined the work. We've joined the forces with the Workers' Party. We're also collaborating with the Trade Unionist Socialist Coalition, another, relatively small setup, as you will recall, by Bob Crow and obviously Dave Nellis. Dave is still the chair of it. So there is that. I mean, and we've seen. There is an appetite. We saw the local elections, for alternative voices. And if I think we can get our act together, then I do think there is scope. I mean, there was a poll, we've talked about this on the show before as well, earlier this year. It was carried in the Independent, which said, you may have seen it, Steve, 2 out of 3 Britons would like to see a new party emerge to take on both the Tories and the Labour Party. So there is, straws in the wind. I mean, so we shouldn't be, and you've talked about, the importance of, beginning again, and we do need to do that. But I just want to, just before bringing Sean, one of the things that the new left sort of sneer at is and you've got a big section on this, and I really enjoyed this section, actually, the whole issue around the politics of nostalgia. Just say a bit about that, really, will you? And then I'll bring in Sean just to see what kind of reaction we'll be getting from people.
Well, another thing, the bad move the new left made was trying to condemn the past as a hellish landscape of prejudice and bigotry, and would simply discard the past and make a move from into the future from where we are, and therefore, if anyone feeling nostalgic of, say, the 60s, how great it was, or even the 70s or 80s, I don't know why I'm really nostalgic for the 80s, but certainly the 60s and 70s are accused of being nostalgic for empire. As if it's our great empire. Well, we lost that in 1948. I don't know how they expect anyone living in a housing estate in Burnley to be nostalgic for the return of Clive of India or something like that. It's so stupid, But we're nostalgic for when we had this imperial greatness. In fact, when we talk to people, and this was the result of decades of research, we're not just making this up out of we're proper researchers, Chris. We go out and ask people, we find out what's going on. They're nostalgic for their mum's cooking. And when the football team was doing a bit better, and the happy memories that they have, we tend to cut out the bad memories and try to remember the happy things. And there were lots of wonderful things out there. I remember going on holiday to a beautiful place in the Northumberland coast with my mum and dad. My mum died 50 of cancer, and I have a lump in my throat now talking about it. I have beautiful memories of my mum. And that's nostalgia. I don't have any nostalgia for when we were, pillaging Africa, and I don't have any nostalgia for that. So they're trying to take our history away from us. And that's a multi-ethnic history as well, because this country's been multi-ethnic since 1948 through the 1950s. And a lot of the immigrants have nostalgia themselves for that sort of time. And some of them experience racism. And we must get rid of racism. We've got to eliminate all of that stuff. But, there's some sociological studies done in the 60s. But nobody talks about them anymore. And there were great studies which said that most of the studies were in places like Longbridge, the car manufacturing plant, where immigrants were coming in to work. the best way of getting rid of racism and for people to realize that they're just human beings is to get them working together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Dennis Skinner tells a great little anecdote similarly. He was saying after the war, when he went down the pit, he said they had a lot of Poles, Lithuanians, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And he said that there was no racism, he said, because everybody was in the union, everybody got the rate for the job, and there wasn't an employment agency anywhere in sight. And, you know, that a lot to be said for that, you know. I really do think that.
I mean, there's not been racial tensions. I mean, the docks in the late 19th century, immigrants were brought in to undercut wages. Let's just factual, you know? And some immigrants are being brought in for precisely that same reason now. A lot of immigrants are working off the cards. They disappear into the black economy. You never hear about them, and they're working for they're being exploited. We're taking people out of their own countries, which makes those countries poorer because it reduces consumer demand and productivity.
And very often, you know, of course, Steve, I mean, the reason...
Bulgaria lost 26% of its population in the heyday of free movement in the EU because so we're impoverishing other countries, which lets the bankers off the hook. They don't have to invest in these countries to boost their industries. We're doing it all completely wrong. So don't deny us our history. We might be white, we might be mixed race, we might be Asian or African, American, Caribbean immigrants or whatever, but we have a history. And let's remember that. Let's remember who we are. That isn't going to stop us forming solidarity because we don't form solidarity out of those memories. We form solidarity out of what we're doing now. We form solidarity in the workplace.
Absolutely. And of course, you know, I mean, not in every case, but I mean, a lot of the reasons why, you know, people seek to move from their home. I mean, you know, it's a big range to leave your home. It's because of exploitation, war, that's actually being perpetrated by the same corporations and you know, people in sort of you know, very high places that are exploiting workers. Anyway, I see we've got Sean on screen, and for the last sort of 10 minutes or so, Sean, what's been the reaction of people watching?
People are really enthralled by the conversation and the discussion. They're finding it really, really interesting. We've got a few questions and comments that have come in. I just want to thank everybody who's joined in the chat tonight. We do encourage people to join in, and we like to hear your views. And if you do have any questions, then just put them in the chat, and we ask the panel at the end of the show. So if you enjoy what we do here, please like, subscribe, click the notification bell. You can even leave us a comment if you want us to do some different subjects or a different show. You've got some suggestions, please leave those in the comments. We do love to hear from you. So the first question is from Darren Alevi, or Darren Alevi. He says, does Steve have any opinions on mega projects like the Belt and Road Initiative, and does he think we can apply similar thinking here to plan for the future?
Well, the Belt and Road Initiative, of course, is the Chinese initiative. It's spreading its wings across Africa. Some people regard it as exploitative. Others, I think, more sensibly regarded that some of the deals China's doing in Africa are certainly a lot better than the deals the Americans have ever done with the countries. You know, like Nigeria with the oil extraction. They're building infrastructure. They're helping them to invest in their own productivity, which is good for the China because it creates a two-way trade, which is better than the one-way trade that the exploitative, extractive trade that the Americans. You know, I don't want to big up the British Empire, but the British Empire wasn't very nice at all. But at least we did put some infrastructure in, and in places like India, we put railroads in and administration. I think the Chinese are doing it better. Nobody knows whether this is going to be exploitative or whether this is just going to be genuine two-way trade. But let's hope that it is. And I think that we could do this if we had control of investment. Again, it's all about control of investment. We could invest in some of these countries, help them to develop their own clean energy sources, help them to become more productive, which would change the terms and the nature of the trade between ourselves and them. They could start manufacturing stuff more, like Taiwan do with bicycle frames, for instance, and we import them in this country to assemble. We could have deals like this. We could have deals. I think that Peter Mullen's book that we quote in ours, where he talks about allowing countries to specialize in various agricultural and industrial products, and to sort out two-way, what we call bilateral in the technical terms. Bilateral trade deals with nations would be a very good idea, because if we're going to move in the green economy, we'll have to shorten supply chains. The capitalists have known since the year 2000 that carting plastic crap over the Indian Ocean from China isn't making enough money. That's why they expanded the derivatives market, because profits were falling. Good old Marxist decline rate of profit was affecting them. So if we can help other countries to develop their own agricultural and industrial products, to specialize, and we start specializing in a few, we could sell energy to the rest of Europe. We have this huge coastline for wind farms, and there's a debate about, the Chinese are building a new thorium nuclear reactor every fortnight right now. Thorium's clean energy.
Yeah,
we can use, we can do anything we want. We can do anything we want. Economies are about real resources and labor and skills. That's all they're about. They're not about banks and finance and inflation and accounts. And they're not about that. They're about what we can actually do. And if we can return to that, there's a very good blog called the Real Economics. If we can return to real economics, the economics of reality, then we can do something similar. And there's nothing to prevent us having healthy trade relationships with China. I think Chinese will be rather worried that we might stop, because they're export dependent at the moment. But of course, if they help other countries to develop their productivity, they become less export dependent and be able to set up bilateral deals with the other nations that join the BRICS. What we're going to call it, a trade bloc.
Yeah. I mean, on your point about real resources, of course, Stephen, that's very much a kind of cornerstone of the whole kind of MMT agenda, about the acknowledgement of the important thing is the kind of availability of real resources. But Sean, any other comments at all?
CA says that, how do you protect a political party against infiltration and hijacking by middle class professionals, particularly when working class people might have aspirations to become more educated and professional themselves, paradoxically?
Oh, there's the $64 million question. I remember when the steelworks closed in 1980, because I was a musician, professional musician at the time. We set up a music project teaching young kids how to play instruments, how to set up sound desks, how to do sound reinforcement, all these technical trades, everything from playing the piano to screen printing T-shirts. And within a few weeks, the middle classes start moving in from Durham University. Oh, I can get you this amount of funding if you do it this way. I can, they start moving in, infiltrating straight away.
Yeah.
It became how do you stop it? Sean, I don't know the name of but I have to just put my hands up and say, I just don't know how you stop these people. They're relentless, because it's the way they earn their living. That's what they do. They run things, and they're brought up to believe that they're capable and competent to run things. And some are. Let's be honest. Some are quite good. I mean, Attlee was great, as long as they had people like Bevan and the two Bevans and the rest of them at his side telling him what was necessary. He went and fixed it. You need fixes.
Yeah, raising political consciousness is one of the keys, though, isn't it? I think I was quite hopeful, because John Trickett was, when Jeremy first got elected, John was supposed to be, it never ever happened in the end, organising a rolling programme of what they call political assemblies, and they were going to be, talking about economics. Although obviously, I don't think there's going to be Corbynovs who are going to be talking about, but but they were going to try and take this sort of thing, this kind of roadshow around, and I think the trade union movement could be playing a role, couldn't they? I mean, shouldn't they be engaged in political education in a way in which raising consciousness and more than they're doing? I know some have done that in the past, but they seem to be doing enough of it today. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, they're not, but I think they lost too many members in private industry. The trade union movement is very much concerned with the public sector.
True enough.
And the bigger industries like rail. And there are people now in the private sector who we've regressed to 100 years here. They're scared to join a union. They don't want to.
Oh, yeah.
you get a job when the Americans, Walmart, were in charge of Asda. They showed a video to all new starters about how awful unions are, why they don't need one. And you're not an employee, you're a colleague. You're a colleague, Asda colleague. So they have these, we're up against a very, very big, powerful monster here in neoliberalism. And as I said before, I think the essential first starting block is to start building a coherent counter narrative, keeping it simple, keeping it economically grounded. What can we do? And we have to be quasi-nationalistic about it. And again, the problem is you get jumped on us. The nation state is the currency issue. So we need to start at the level of the nation state. That's just a fact. It's got nothing to do with how xenophobic I am about
no.
It's just a fact.
The one good thing that Gordon Brown did, probably the only good thing, is to keep us out of the bloody euro, but anyway.
Well, he did. That would have been, the euro's a disaster. It's effectively, you owe debt in foreign currency.
Of course, they relegate nation states to the status of a local authority, effectively, because you're not control of your own, economy.
Greece has been in control of its own currency. It
yes.
Dropped it a bit, flood the place with tourists again on cheap holidays, get their economy going again, and that's a completely different story.
I've a lot of time for Yanis Varoufakis, but I could never understand, maybe it was sort of pressures on him, why he he's continued to support the membership of the euro. It seems to be a bonkers. Anyway,
I know people who, I better not say anything, but I think that I don't think he was a supporter of Europe. He just thought that if you go against the EU, then you're labelled as a nationalist, and he didn't want.
I know those pressures. I appreciate that. Yeah. But Sean, let's just have one or two more, then we're probably better wrap it up.
Just one more question from Katie Marshall. She says, "I've managed to get my niece on my wavelength. How do I reach her friends? I've got her reading Parenti and Mark Fisher now. What other books would you recommend for myself and her?"
Well, apart from ours, of course, just read.
Yeah, get this one. This one.
read Fatsy and Mitchell, Reclaiming the State, and read anything by the great Michael Hudson. Read anything by Michael Hudson. Michael Hudson's the best economist we have. He's not entirely an MMT aficionado, but he does support the basics of MMT with one or two caveats.
Would you recommend? The Deficit Myth as well?
Deficit Myth, if for anyone who wants to do a very good, lucid, and comprehensible understanding, but get Michael Hudson's book and Forgive Them Their Debts. It's an incredible, helicopter ride through history from the Bronze Age to the present to outline this. What the main struggle, I think the Marxists got it slightly wrong. The class struggle exists, but there's a deeper struggle underneath the class struggle, and that is the struggle between creditor and debtor, between those who can lend out money, those who have the resources to act as collateral to lend that money, and those who owe that money back.
There's another book which is not out yet, which I would recommend. It should be published later this month or maybe next, and that's called Fiat Socialism. And this is all about how you can essentially apply modern monetary theory to deliver a socialist program. So that's due out this month or next.
Absolutely.
So,
and if anyone wants to dive into MMT, the real technical details, there's a book out, Edward Elgar Press, written by MMT thinkers, Warren Mosler and Bill Mitchell and all the rest of that. I can't remember the name of it. I've got it on.
If you can think of it, Steve, send us a message, and when we post this link out, because people watch it afterwards rather than just live, we can actually put that in the link so they can access that as well.
Phil Mullen's stuff, Phil Mullen's stuff also worth a read on international relations and economics. Yeah.
Right. Well, listen, Steve, we've got an hour. We could go back 2 or 3 hours, mate. It's really, really interesting. We really enjoyed talking to you this evening. Let me thank you for taking the time out to speak to us this evening. I really, as I say, enjoyed it. And thank you, everybody, for watching tonight. please buy this book and share it around. It's really, really important. It's very, very, look, I can read it. I ain't no intellectual. I'm just an ex-bricklayer. I found it was a page turner, mate. It really,
we tried very, very hard to make it accessible. We tried very well, but we tried. Well,
in my opinion, you've definitely succeeded, mate. So it's brilliant. Yeah. Well, thanks again, mate. Anyway, and as I say, thanks everybody for watching. Hopefully, we'll be back next week to the same time on Resistance TV. So until then, this is Chris Williamson saying bye for now.